Raiden Shogun's arrival has definitely caused a lot of discussions within the player base, and there's a few things that need to be addressed in this video. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by World Flipper, a new gacha game that combines the elements of pinball with action RPG and features gameplay like never before. Form a party of 3 heroes and pair each of them with a secondary character that enables unique strategies and helps you come up with different ways to maximize your damage. And there's more than 100 heroes and 150 different weapons you can collect with their own skills and abilities. Not to mention, you'll also get to see many different stages with adorable pixel art graphics, and characters you collect are brought to life with their own personal stories. But you can also hang out with your friends in a co-op mode, where up to 2 players can join to beat up raid bosses to unleash coordinated chain combo attacks. Most importantly, if you pre-register right now, you'll get a free 4-star character and a lot of premium currency. But in addition to this, you can even get an exclusive summon ticket if you pre-order the game on Google Play or App Store. And you can pre-register to the game right now by clicking on the link below the video, and by doing so, you'll be supporting the channel, so make sure to check out World Flipper today. If you had to pick a word to describe the current situation surrounding Raiden, then it would be passion. And honestly, it's quite amazing to see how many different opinions have formed around her, which only suggests that there is an underlying problem somewhere in the middle of it. So encapsulating this whole situation, at least as of now, and reviewing it with all the available resources is something that definitely needs to be done. So where do we start from? Well, let's begin this by admitting Raiden Shogun is probably one of the most popular characters ever released in Genshin's history, with some of the statistics showing her revenue within the first few days managed to beat every single banner out there since Genshin's arrival. Now, to be frank, these results are unfair because of the double top-up bonuses getting reset after the update, but even then, MiHoYo basically had this whole banner event building up for almost 2 months, so it was inevitable Raiden was going to grab the attention of the majority of the player base. Which brings us to the first critical thing we need to understand about Raiden, and it's the fact MiHoYo is pretty much dominating the whole art of introducing new characters and hyping them up to cosmic levels, and one thing that always comes with the hype are expectations. And interestingly enough, part of these expectations get fulfilled just by Raiden's design alone. Otherwise, you wouldn't have players spending their primo gems like crazy on her, but that alone isn't enough. So imagine this situation. A major character that's part of an ongoing storyline with a fascinating background is hard to resist, not to mention the whole visual eye candy you get with the attack animations. So now that we have established something that's very obvious yet critical to this whole situation, it's time to dig deeper and show you exactly just how many interesting discussions are going on at the same time, because it's not as simple as the whole fiasco with Raiden and Beidou interaction, which will get covered later in the video, and instead it has to do with something that's been building up since the game's release. Look, most of us already know that Electro element is in a weird spot right now, but honestly, not a lot of people care about this because the problematic nature of this element has been around for a while and only shows up on the final floors of the Abyss or at some of the more challenging events we've seen in the past. Otherwise, for world exploration, it's an absolutely fun element to use since enemies are weaker and more susceptible to reactions like Electro Charge, where it could be a rainy weather, or you're standing near a water source, which there's plenty of in the newest region, or you could be even fighting inside a monster camp, and there's a conveniently placed pyro slime barrel and bonfires to help you cause overloads. In short, the Electro element actually interacts with the world around you, but when you're placed in the literal vacuum that is a timed challenge, it starts to hurt you, especially when Electro Charge becomes unreliable, or overload knocks back your enemy and you have to keep chasing them. And this becomes quite clear that it's a bother to many players, or at least those who are doing Spiral Abyss, because if you look at any of the usage data, you'll see the Electro element characters sitting at the bottom. Although, to be fair, starter characters like Lisa get less attention simply because you get her for free, even if she is actually pretty strong, or someone like Razor who's not really Electro but a physical damage dealer instead. So even if there are a couple of characters like Fischl and Beidou getting some spotlight, having an already formed opinion about this element from the majority of the player base who participate in the Abyss, and the fact we haven't had a new Electro character since the game's launch, is enough to guarantee confusion at best when Raiden came out. In fact, this is the very same thing that happened with Zhongli, at least when we talk about the element itself, because not only was he criticized for his own power balance, but Geo was also considered to be in a bad place. And this is where things get tricky. Now that we know Electro is considered to be one of the least popular elements within the Abyss player base, it was inevitable for Raiden to get criticized when she got released, even if the element is actually pretty fun to use in the world itself. But because of the controversial past Electro has with some of the community, Raiden basically put the element under a huge magnifying glass. So in essence, right now we're looking at two critical things about Raiden's release. She is extremely popular, and because she's an Electro Archon, the element came with its own slice of drama, which is why anything that follows afterwards is going to be scrutinized to the smallest details. And this is how we arrive to the most recent issues that have come up. Let's start by addressing the thing that's been talked about the most. Why Raiden Shogun to an extent cannot work well together with Beidou. And to not bore you with details, the timeline of what happened was that Raiden got released. People immediately noticed she will not trigger Beidou's burst attack, and this sort of got confirmed by MiHoYo's social media post, which contained an in-depth explanation of how Raiden's attacks during burst are not considered to be normal charge or plunging, but instead are treated as burst damage. But then, why does this matter, and why even bother writing a whole paragraph of such a convoluted design? Well, the biggest reason would have to be the emblem of Severed Fate artifacts set, which in order for it to work, the attacks performed in Raiden's sword mode must be associated with burst damage to get that foresaid bonus applied to them. Now, this is all fine and dandy, however, MiHoYo themselves had to correct a major wording issue with Raiden's last constellation, where it referenced her burst attacks dealing normal charge and plunging damage, and then got revised to simply being called part of her elemental burst attacks. But if you go over to her burst's attributes, the attacks are listed as if you're looking at your good old regular attack talent with its own damage multipliers. And let's not forget Beidou's burst specifically states you only need to do a hit of normal or charge attack, not damage, which is why you can trigger her burst even when attacking a shielded enemy. You simply have to perform a hit, that's all. So it really begs the question, why not just have the best of both worlds? Raiden's sword mode still treats all the attacks as if it deals burst damage, while the hit itself is counted as coming from her normal charge or plunging attack, which are even there specified in her burst's attributes. After all, it's not like this would break the game in terms of balance, and even then, the power level is tied to having two characters in the same team, which already puts a limit on the amount of team comps you can come up with, even when using them together. But that's basically the whole situation with Beidou as of now. It's still important to note this doesn't really take away a lot from Raiden, because she's still a very much capable quick swap damage dealer with her own set of pros and cons. But the reason why this gets so much attention is that there was a clear miscommunication with some of the player base, and it makes you wonder if perhaps MiHoYo should post these kinds of clarifications before the update goes live, so that players can have an informed opinion when they decide to invest their primo gems. Finally, it's also important to acknowledge the Chinese player base, because most of their online discussions were not just about Beidou's weird interaction with the burst, but also the fact Raiden's elemental skill does not trigger on shielded enemies, while the special mechanic to boost burst damage isn't something that amazed them, so it really provides a different perspective from the Western community. However, to be fair, it does specify quite clearly in the talent that in order to trigger the coordinated attack from the skill, it has to come in the form of a hit and deal damage at the same time. But this isn't something new, because in the previous Raiden video, it was also listed as one of her drawbacks for having a pretty weak damaging skill, and while this is disappointing, at least there is no questioning about functionality or how she's designed to work. And as long as we're on the topic of damage, this next part is all about it. It's kind of fascinating how much attention Raiden is getting these past few days, and while there are definitely some areas MiHoYo needs to improve upon, just like any other business, the most important thing is to always remember that this is a video game and everyone understands fun subjectively. Some find the enjoyment in simply exploring the world without caring about the abyss, others are focused on min-maxing their characters so that they can be in their best form. In the end, what really matters right now is to prevent power creep from happening in the game for as long as possible, because there's nothing worse than seeing your previous investment getting invalidated by a new one. Luckily, this has only happened once so far, and it was the Vortex Vanquisher that got eclipsed by Staff of Homa, and even at some point Primordial Jade Wingspear also managed to beat it, so MiHoYo really needs to tread carefully, although they do seem to have a handle on this now, because these new 5-star weapons coming out are nothing more than a handcrafted version for the featured 5-star character, even if some other characters can use these weapons quite well. And at least for now, Raiden definitely feels like a fun character to use both in world exploration and Abyss, not to mention the way she serves a niche function by supporting high-cost energy characters, which makes her quite future-proofed, especially if we start to see more characters coming out with bursts that have an energy cost higher than 80. Most important of all, you should not feel pressured to pull for additional constellations of Raiden, and in fact, you should never pull for them if you do not have the disposable income, because at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. Genshin is not a game that features leaderboards or hardcore gameplay, because the only thing that's really challenging is the Spiral Abyss, which in all honesty, doesn't take more than half an hour to fully clear after each reset, and then you're back to the usual events, world exploration, and domains. And it's actually the first time when 2 extra constellations were unlocked on Raiden, just to check out the difference, and while it was pretty big, you could still put her in a lot of teams even at 0 constellations. But just to give you some perspective, a lot of you were kind enough to fill out the most recent survey where it showed that almost 25% of you had more than 1 constellation unlocked on Raiden, but what's even more surprising was that 66% of Raiden owners had her at 0 constellations after perfectly clearing the final floor of the Abyss. So even while the constellations give her a huge damage boost, this is just MiHoYo's strategy of trying to convert more people into higher paying customers, but in reality, it's far more worse when an important mechanic or functionality gets removed from a character. For example, their previous infamous practice was to literally get rid of a charged attack stamina cost on Hu Tao's first constellation, which basically transforms her usability and makes it irresistible not to get that extra constellation. However, as someone who doesn't have it unlocked, she is still fun to use, but it's clear there would be a lot more freedom when using her with that additional constellation. So all in all, in Raiden's case, even at 0 constellations, she is still part-time support, part-time quick swap damage dealer, while also serving a specific function to high-cost energy characters, and unlike the other Archons, she demands a serious investment in her equipment just to see those serious damage numbers. Now, pair this together with her extreme popularity, a controversial element she belongs to, and some clear miscommunication regarding her viability with Beidou, not to mention the enticing constellations she has to offer, and you've got yourself a hot topic that will last for weeks, if not months, into the future. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. Deconstructing the events surrounding a popular character is always something that's worth doing for the history books, but it also takes a lot of time investigating it, so you could really help the channel out by subscribing to it and gently pressing the like button. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.